I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ian, and he'll share, what this will look like and some of the exhibits. So, I meant to add that Ian has worked with Jay Fuller for some time. He worked down in the Tucson area and did a lot of work with Pima County on very similar local floodplains and FEMA floodplain remapping, those types of things down there as well. So he's got a lot of experience with this process. So.
Yeah, thank you, Lucinda. So yeah, my name is Ian Sharp, civil engineer with J. Fuller. Been with J. Fuller for 20 years, and most of my career has been this right here. So I did the analysis on this project for the county, for the flood control district, and we did the report, determined the various discharge rates for the 2-year through 500-year, and did the flood inundation. I feel like no matter where I stand, I'm in the wrong spot here. So with that, I'm going to probably walk you through a lot of what Lucinda has already said, but I'll say it a little different and give you a little bit of different background. But what we have done, we did a lot of analysis, and on this map, I want to show with you guys, there's 2 floodplains you see here. The light blue cyan area, the smaller floodplain, that is that effective Zone A FEMA floodplain that's inaccurate. It's underwhelming. It really doesn't show the true flood risk. And the other floodplain, it's obviously much larger, but it's including not just the Coconino Wash, but we're including the tributaries that come in from the different directions. And it's what we believe is truly showing the flood risk that approaches Tucson and impacts Tucson. So what I want to do is explain what the local floodplain is, how we arrived at it, and what it means. So the Zone A floodplain was probably delineated back in the 70s, 80s, somewhere in that area, and it would have been done on paper maps. It would have been done with some back of the napkin calculations, and unfortunately, we just don't have those models. We don't know what the discharges were. We don't really have a lot of supporting data, so it's, we often joke, it's basically a Sharpie on a map. Somebody delineated what they think the floodplain is, and we have to live with it. The other problem is, if you really look close at this, you'll see there's some shifts in the floodplain. In it, basically what happened was in the early 2000s, there was a map modernization process where they took the paper maps and digitized them. There's a lot of errors with that. So they end up showing hill slopes that are flooded and valleys that are dry. And again, we have to live with that. So what we did for the district was we prepared modeling, hydrology and hydraulic modeling, floodplain inundation modeling that is FEMA quality. So basically what we have today as a report is really close to being able to go to FEMA and say, FEMA, we believe the Zone A is wrong. Here's what it really should be, and here's why. And we could start that letter map revision process. As Lucinda stated, that's a long process, 2 to 3, 4 years. And so in the interim, what you can do, or instead of a LOMAR, what you do is you do these local floodplains. And so the area that we show in that dark blue floodplain, that's the same floodplain that we'd go to FEMA with. So if this was to be remapped, it's the same floodplain. You're just recognizing it locally as the local community, what it is. This is the same thing. We're just further upstream. This is in that 10X area, and just showing the different floodplains. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that. So I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. You guys are all aware of the flood that happened, but I just want to give a couple statistics on it. So that was a really strong event that happened in August of 2023. And what happened was there was about 3.5 inches of rain that fell on the middle of the watershed. And then as you went out from the middle of the watershed, it was about 1/2 inch. So it was this distributed storm, but it wasn't uniform across the watershed. And that most intense part was about a 25-year event. So in 6 hours, they got about 3.5 inches. So it was pretty intense, much less intense on the perimeter of it. And what it led to was the flooding that you see here that you're aware of and you've seen in the pictures. And the discharge that was recorded, so the town of Tucson has a flow gauge down at the wastewater treatment plant. And that treatment plant gauge recorded a flow depth of 1.4 feet deep. So, you think about that, that's really not that deep, but at the velocity it was going and all that, we back calculated, it was a flow rate of 1,400 CFS, cubic feet per second. In our modeling, we have computed the 10-year flow rate is 940 CFS, the 25-year is 3,200, the 100-year is 10,000 CFS. So this is somewhere around a 10-year event. 1,400 CFS, what does that mean? You could fill an Olympic swimming pool in 1 minute with that. It's 630 fire hydrants flowing at the same time. It's a lot of water. And this is only, somewhere between a 10 and 25 years. So the 100-year event's much, much greater. So this is the Zone A existing FEMA floodplain at the town area again. And what we did is we looked at who are the parcels that are currently in the floodplain, either partially or wholly, and how many structures are there. And so currently there's 21 parcels and 49 permanent structures that are in the floodplain. And we're well aware that that's not accurate, in that we saw that that flood from a couple of years ago was much stronger and much more inundation than just this. So if we look at this map, this is what we're calling the local floodplain. We now would say that there's 54 parcels that are impacted by a floodplain and possibly 71 structures. So there's a lot more. And then this is really what I want to focus on. This is the combined, these are your two floodplains. You have your Zone A, and then you have what we're calling in the orange, the local floodplain. And so I've been working with John Carr, and we've been looking at revising the ordinance for you guys, the floodplain regulations. And the way your regulations are currently written, they're primarily focused on FEMA special flood hazard areas. So that is your jurisdiction. That's what you focus on. And what we're looking at doing is revising, that's the language we've looked at, revising it to regulatory floodplain. So regulatory floodplain will now be FEMA special flood hazard areas as well as local floodplain. So they'll both be the thing that you regulate. So in this situation, those will both be collectively a regulatory floodplain, two different inundation areas, but one floodplain, if you will. We looked at all the different parcels that are impacted by this, and as Lucinda said, we're reaching out to the landowners, collectively meeting with them individually to explain, here's how your change of status is, helping them understand how it impacts them. Then 2 more slides. So the question that's asked, and Lucinda hit on this, is flood insurance required? And the answer is no. It's definitely recommended, but because you're in a local floodplain, that doesn't mean you have to have flood insurance. There's no mechanism to force that upon you. There is a negative to that when you buy property, that there's not an automatic trigger that tells you you're in a floodplain. So there's a little bit of education that needs to happen to help landowners know when they buy a parcel they're in a floodplain. But the flood risks are there, and so you definitely want to encourage flood insurance. And then, what are the development implications? So the way it's being looked at now is, if you're in a local floodplain, you're very much going to be treated just like you would be if you were in a FEMA special flood hazard area. It's going to be the same. Make sure you develop above the 100-year flood. Make sure you do a no adverse impact analysis so you're not adversely impacting your neighbors. And then if you are in a FEMA Zone A, yes, you'll still have to do the FEMA CLOMA or LOMA, but if you're in the local floodplain, you will not need to do that process. Unless there's any questions for me, I'll pass it back to Lucinda.
So in effect, this really, the major impact here is on development, future development, and what might be undertaken or not undertaken. And, I'm hopeful that we can work with the property owners to address both the flood risks and also continue to support development, right? So that will be our goal, but this will give us the regulatory authority to be able to do so and bring forth the accurate risk. I also want to share that with this process, of course, we're working with the district's attorney to be sure that, we're going through the process of modifying the ordinance, correctly. And so he's actually the one that's generating the change to the ordinance, and will be the one that will ultimately approve what language goes to you, of course, draft it, and he'll be the one that will sign off on that before it comes to you. So no, we're working closely with John Gaylord on that effort. So
if I can just make a
Sure.
comment, and I don't know if the mayor would also like to address this at all. She's certainly welcome to. And one of the comments I would make is, having been there and seen the flood that occurred and the level and the degree of flooding that closed Highway 64 and, quite frankly, stranded many of the young children that were going to school at Grand Canyon Unified School District because they literally could not get home. I understand they had a party, and so they seemed to be doing very well, and weathered it quite well, but their parents didn't weather it nearly as well. So we all know that the FEMA floodplain is not accurate. We all know that the FEMA floodplain does not reflect the risks that are there within this area. And so, one of the things that we've all talked about is we have really a moral and ethical obligation to make sure that we have a floodplain that does in fact reflect the risk and reflect the conditions. So, and may even be a legal requirement, but it certainly is something that morally and ethically are something that we, the board, need to do. And so when people do come and they do want to build, they are aware of what they're getting themselves into instead of these 1970 paper maps that are being referred to. So I really applaud, quite frankly, the town of Tucson and our flood control district for really taking a look at this, taking it very seriously, getting everything together for us to review so that we can do our job as supervisors. So I want to thank you for that. So, and Mayor, please join us.
Hello. Lorinda Vale, 120 Shimmy Lane in Tucson, Arizona. Thank you guys so much. I just really want to thank everybody for the process. I'm sorry that Tucson had a flood, and I'm sorry that Flagstaff has had your fires and floods, but having gone through that, the expertise that you guys have and that your teams has, I can't imagine going through this just with our council and our engineers and our people. I just can't imagine. I'm very glad that Coconino County is in charge of our flood control because it has just been an amazing process to have that team working together. And I cannot say enough about Lucinda, about Joe, about Ian, about Chris, just everybody. It's just been an amazing process. All of you guys, just thank you so much. I'm sorry that we're here, but we're going to fix it. And when you look at those ridiculous maps, that's, what we've been dealing with. And so it's a process that's going to get there. But I am really thankful that it's this team and these people that we're taking a bite out of it and going to get it done. I don't think we could have a better team doing that. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Any other comments, questions? And if not, we know this will be coming back to
Yes.
us.
December 9th.
And thank you for the information and look forward to getting this done, quite frankly.
Thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciate it. Thank you.